I got a little preview. There you go. All right. All right. So, Guardian Druid finally exists. We got some changes to our talent tree going into this week's beta update. And so we're going to go through them. We're going to talk about them. We're going to talk about what's wrong with them. And we're going to talk about how maybe Guardian Druid can get a bit of a fix. Maybe Copium before Dragonflight, but maybe 10.1. So let's do that. Let's do that. So those that aren't aware, basically what happened this week is the Moonfire traits got moved into the capstone level down here, these three, and the traits they replace got moved up a bit. So that would be Survival of the Fittest, Soul of the Forest, and then after the Wildfire / Guardian of Elune, those got moved up a bit to where they were. And then we got a bunch of more connections. You can see here, like, where is it? Improved Survival Instinct goes down, Ursox Endurance goes down, Infected Wounds goes down. There's traits now in the center here that have been broken up, and they connect down as well. So we got a bunch of connections. We got some things moving around. We also got a couple buffs / nerfs this week. So Maul got buffed by 40%. Mangle got buffed by 15%. And then Twin Moonfire, this trait, it now only gives 10% Moonfire damage. It used to give 20%. So they're trying to shift some of our damage away from Moonfire, which is good, though I don't think that's quite enough. Like Mangle's not doing much of our damage. Maul is also not doing too much of our damage. So the shift is not quite enough, I think, but it's definitely a move in the right direction. I do think we do way too much of our damage inside of from Moonfire. I don't think it should be that way. So definitely want that shifted more for sure. But let's talk about it. What kind of builds look like now? What the tree kind of forces you to do now, and we'll go through that. So off the top, nothing really changes, of course. Nothing has changed in the capstone level, or not the capstone level, in the initial level here. So you're just kind of doing the same thing you would do before. Let's assume this is Mythic Plus, so we're going down this way. We want Flashing Claws, we want Earth Warden, and now we're like, oh, okay, so how do we actually get to the Moonfire traits? Because like I mentioned, Moonfire is still just a massive portion of our damage. It's non-negotiable. You have to take the Moonfire traits with current tuning. So what we kind of have to do now is decide, okay, so we need to access Moonfire, but we also kind of want to access these traits here, because again, there's no connections. So this is really our only road to go down that will give us both those options. The problem is this is random, very low % chances. You can't really rely on this. And you have a lower iron for volume now because you have lower rage gen. It's not great all around. You have to put 2 points in that. Reinforced fur, that 4% iron for armor essentially does nothing. You get a little bit extra DR on bark skin, but in general just doesn't feel great. But that opens up your traits for you here. So you can grab Fury of Nature. You can grab Berserk Persistence. You have a few points here to do something with. Tooth and Claw notably also is now a 2-point talent. So you couldn't go like bang, bang and get a Tooth and Claw. So you could go like another Berserk buff. You could get something like Soul of the Forest there. You could go here, you could get Gory Fur. There's your capstone. So you need to invest 4 points here for Moonfire stuff and 2 points here for, again, Moonfire stuff. So if you're counting, that's 6 talent points currently for Moonfire stuff in the capstone tray alone. In the capstone, you have to invest 6 points to buff your Moonfire. It's way too many points, right? A lot of other tanks, they have like 3, 4 kind of traits in the capstone that buff like a certain thing or a certain playstyle. 6 is too many. I'm fine with 3 or 4. 6 is way, way, way too many. And on top of this, like, right, these Moonfire traits, you still have no way to actually access all these Moonfire traits together, right? There's no cohesion in the tree. There's no like synergy between the points and the pathing that you're taking, which is something that does exist in the other tank trees, right? You move down, it all kind of flows. It makes sense. Maybe there's some changes here and there, but like all traits that kind of relate to each other lead into each other or are connected in some way, whereas this just isn't the case here, right? Fear of the Nature, Elune's Favored, which are strictly like Moonfire related traits, are not connected to Scintillating Moonlight, Galactic Guardian, Twin Moonfire. They weren't before either, and these are just moved and still not connected. So The reasoning here doesn't really make sense. What they really just did is took our really strong, kind of overtuned talents, to be honest with you, in terms of damage, not even in terms of what they do, right? Because like if you look at something like Scintillating Moonlight, this is a 2-point trait. Previously in this row, which I can forgive if it's in this row, it gives 2% DR per point in it into your Moonfire. But you can look at a trait like I can pull it up actually. Let me pull it up. Let me pull up the Wowhead talent calculator for something like Vengeance. All right. There it is. Void Reaver. Frailty reduces damage you take from afflicted targets by 4%. This is a 1-point node in the middle row that just does everything Scintillating Moonlight does and more, and it's just better. It's single-point talent in the middle row. Why do you have to invest 2 points in this, but let alone 2 points? Why do you have to invest 2 capstone points in this? Like, I don't understand the decision to move these 3 talents to the capstone level. It just doesn't make sense to me. I feel like these should be more accessible than they were, and they need to be leading into the Moonfire traits. Another problem I have, Berserk nodes. There's still 3 of them, and Berserk still sucks, honestly. If you don't take Incarn, Berserk is terrible. It's just bad. Even with 3 nodes buffing it. It's just a bad spell. I've talked about this a little bit in my other video. I am team delete Berserk, but I'm going to assume they don't do that. I'm going to assume that instead of deleting Berserk, they don't delete Berserk. So I'm going to suggest some ways to maybe make this feel less terrible. But let's stick with the problems of the current tree for now. Another problem with connections, the Thrash talents over here still have no way to connect to Incarn, something that you would expect. You know, if you're taking these talents, you probably also want to take Incarn. There's some synergy there, and it just makes sense. Still no way to actually get there. Looking back at the capstone talent, there's also still no lateral movement whatsoever within the capstone tree. They added some connections, sure, but there's no way to move across in the capstone section like some of the other trees have. Spells like Rage of the Sleeper as well are just severely undertuned, and it's just, instead of being able to avoid some of these undertuned talents, right, like Layered Mane, like Reinforced Fur, you're now just kind of forced to path through them, which kind of is weird. Rage of the Sleeper is missing its 25% damage increase. I think that would have made it way better, right? Like right now it's just like worse Eye of Tyr from Protection Paladins. Again, I can pull that up here. If you look at Protection Paladins, so Eye of Tyr is right here, right at the beginning of the capstone tree. So very accessible, not at the bottom of the capstone tree. It's a 1 minute CD instead of 1 minute 50, and it's the same DR. I believe this actually does more damage than the current Rage of the Sleeper, but let's assume the damage is to wash. You lose 1 second of DR in exchange for a 30-second reduced cooldown. It's just way better. Really needs that damage component back to it to kind of justify this longer cooldown, in my opinion. Would like to see that. But overall, what you're kind of left with this talent tree change is honestly, it's almost worse. It's certainly worse power-wise for Guardian, just because of the tuning of the Moonfire traits, or Moonfire itself rather, but it feels worse to navigate through. I'm kind of baffled by the change. But with that said, like how do you actually change Guardian Druid tree without changing the tree too much? You know what I mean? Like I don't want to massively change the design of the tree or whatever, because I think that's not going to happen in a decent time frame, right? Maybe 10.1. But let me give you some suggestions on how the tree can be a bit better. And let's pull up my masterpiece. Okay. All right. So I've tried to maintain a general tree shape. I've tried to only input abilities that already exist. And we have a bit of a color code scheme here. So yellow is going to be talents that have been reworked. Green is going to be talents that just need a straight buff. Red is going to be new talents / abilities, whatever. So first off, starting with things that should be baseline. I've moved them all over here to the side. We've got the Mangle ranked 2. For those unaware, that just is over here. It just makes Mangle deal 20% additional damage to bleeding targets. That should just be baked into Mangle. It makes no sense you have to buy a talent point for that. It's really, it does make sense. Going back. We also have the infected wounds. This is just straight utility that is in the tree that it's just, you're never going to take it because it competes with actual throughput, and other people have access to passive slows anyways without investing in it or whatever. So you're never going to take this point. So it should just be baseline, honestly. You're never going to invest it. It's a dead point in the talent tree. It doesn't really connect anywhere great that you can't get to anyways. It doesn't give you anything great. It's competing with throughput. Doesn't make sense. I have the rank 2 SI here, and with it also Frenzied Regen. Second charges of Frenzied Regen and Survival Instincts should be baked into just the thing itself. So Survival Instincts should give you 2 charges. Frenzied Regen should give you 2 charges. Those are just baseline things in the spec. I think should still exist. It doesn't really make sense that you have to invest another point to get a charge of Survival Instincts, especially when you have things like the Warrior Tree. You get a second charge of Shield Wall, and you get a CDR on Shield Wall at the same time when you're getting that second point. It just doesn't make sense. Finally, Earth Sign Adept. This is just being able to cast things in bear form. Also, while we're at it, add Innervate to this list, please. Not being able to cast Innervate in bear form is very, very unfortunate, and drastically reduces the value of Innervate for Guardian Druids. So yeah, make the ability to cast things in bear form just a default for Guardian Druids. Makes sense to me. We also have things that I think you should just straight up remove from the Guardian tree. Front of the pack here, it maybe move this to the general tree or something, because again, it's the same problem Infected Wounds has. It's just competing with throughput, and it's really just not something you're going to end up taking very much of it all, so it doesn't make sense. Reinforced Fur, just a relatively weak, like half the trait is useless, and the other half kind of overlaps with something that I'm adding to the tree, so I've just removed that as well. So that's what we're removing. That's what we're making baseline. Now let's look at the tree itself, and let's start with these green squares. So these green squares are the things that we're buffing. So starting with Ursoc's Endurance, it was made into a single point talent in this patch of the beta, which is great. I think that's what it needed, but it also needs to be the effect of the 2-point talent. So that's what I'm suggesting here. Just make it an additional 2 seconds on Barkskin or Iron Fur. Moving down the tree, Dream of Scenarios at the bottom. I actually think this is a really interesting talent. It's not super strong at the moment. I think it needs something like the ICD reduced on it slightly. So right now, if you look at it down here, it has a 20-second ICD. Maybe make this like 10 to 15 seconds, or maybe make it give the regrowth a healing increase. But overall, I actually like the design of this talent. I think it's really interesting, and I'm all for it existing. I just think it needs a little bit of love. Going back, we have Into the Wildfire here, also an interesting talent. So let's take a look at that one there. So I think, again, needs a bit of numbers help. This had the healing buffed this patch. So maybe doing something like reducing the overall rage you need to spend to trigger that healing. I think definitely needs a bit of a range increase as well. Could also potentially need another healing increase, but we'll have to wait and see on that one. I'm going to have to see how this one feels. But in general, it just needs to be brought up a bit. Again, cool talent. Not 100% sure about the current tuning on it. Guardian of Loon, I don't think it actually needs too much of a buff. I just think it's in a bad spot. I think something you could actually do as well is you could separate this choice node, and you could just delete Ursoc's Endurance and put Guardian of a Loon there instead. I think that would be cool. This is also like a more interesting talent than just a flat boost to Iron Fur and Barkskin. Maybe he needs like a slight buff, but I think that's something you could do to be a little bit more, interesting and usable. Now let's go back and talk about abilities that I think need a bit of a rework even. Starting with Berserk. So this is the Ravage portion of Berserk. I think that Persistence should be just baked into it. So again, looking at this, this currently only adds or reduces the cooldown of Mangle, Thrash, and Growl. I think this right here, which is reducing the cooldown of Frenzied Regen and cost of Iron Fur, should be baked in. There should be one trait, 1 point to buy these 2 talents here. So that's what I'm suggesting. Moving down even to Innate Resolve. Again, I've removed the additional charge of Frenzied Regen from this because that's now baseline, and instead I've boosted the healing on this by 5% on Frenzy Regen and Regrowth. Again, this could have some potential interesting synergy with Dream of Cenarius down here. Like if they instead opt to remove like the ICD and make this so that it increases your just your general regrowth and frenzied regen healing, so that then this would then impact your Dream of Cenarius if you healed other people. That could be interesting as well. So it's a potential change as well. Just make this all healing. Because if you look at it currently, right, this is only self-healing it increases. So potentially cool synergy there if you made this all healing so that you had big regrowths on other people that were also free and castable in bear form. Going back, Tooth and Claw, I'm just making sure that this is a single point talent, not a 2-point talent. There's so many strong single point talents in like middle tiers of talent trees. All right, let's look at where is it? Just look at warriors, man. Like I think everything is like a single point talent here, right? Like Thunderlord, heavy repercussions, anger management, impenetrable wall, punish, bolster, right? All these are 1-point talents in the middle of the tree. There's no reason why Tooth and Claw has to be a 2-point talent. So I'm suggesting just moving Tooth and Claw back to a single point talent. Layered Mane, I've removed the Frenzied Regen effect on it, and I have kind of 2 suggestions for this trait. One, I think you need to literally double the Iron Fur chance, so make it a 10-20% chance to apply 2 stacks of Iron Fur if you wanted to keep it with the RNG aspect. But another option is to actually make this deterministic, right? You could make it so that every 4th or 5th Iron Fur or something like that will guaranteed grant a second stack of Iron Fur, and that way you can actually plan around, okay, I know an Iron Fur from now I'm going to get 2, so I can kind of plan out my rage in such a way. And obviously deterministic things are always better than randomness for tanks, especially when it comes to mitigation. So that's kind of my suggestion there for Layered Mane. Beneath that we have Pulverize, again reworked to just no longer consume thrash stacks. I think it just doesn't make sense. Maybe to compensate, you could reduce this single target DR by like 5 to 10%, just to compensate for like, oh, you're no longer giving up thrash stacks. I think that's fine, but I just think it taking thrash stacks just doesn't really make sense with the current gameplay. Finally, just adding back in that 25% damage increase to Rage of the Sleeper to make it actually a valuable capstone trait, because currently it's just not really very good, especially as a very bottom of the talent tree trait. Now, I've also added in 4 new abilities here. So we, of course, in the middle here, we have the Sepulcher 2-piece. So that is some sort of Incarn/Berserk duration upon using Bark Skin for the first, I think it was 4 seconds. Really great trait that helped Guardian Druids out a lot. Well loved. I think it's a slam dunk. I think you put it in the center of the tree here. It's a really, really great trait. It helps Guardian Druid with a lot of like initial problems with like aggro and just grouping up packs and things like that. And I think it makes sense. I've also added Lunar Beam to the tree as well, so it would provide Guardians with a short CD, both offensive and defensive ability. My one suggestion is to kind of remove the passive healing portion that it has, because we already have arcane damage as healing as another trait, and maybe make this just boost all healing you receive while you stand in the circle for the duration. And maybe it converts overhealing to like an absorb up to a cap, something like that, to give it a decent defensive boost that isn't just more passive healing. That's just going to be overhealing in plenty of cases. So actually giving a value to that overhealing. Moving down the tree more, Natural Orders will. People are, I'm sure, familiar with the current legendary in Shadowlands, an extra 10% DR on Barkskin, as well as an Iron Fern Frenzied Regen. Now, I'm suggesting you only do this Iron Fern Frenzied Regen at the end of the Barkskin, not at the beginning and the end. So it's a slight nerf to Natural Order's Will, but then it doesn't kind of overlap with the Sepulcher 2-piece up here. So this would be at the beginning of your Barkskin if you had both these traits, and then this would be at the end. And then I've kind of circled this Maul trait up here. This is currently just crit. For Maul, I'm not the biggest fan of this. I think it's kind of boring. I think there's plenty more interesting things you could do to Maul. Things like a Maul rage reduction, things like making Maul revert to kind of how Maul used to work, where it would apply to your next auto attack, which would effectively remove Maul from the GCD. Could also be interesting, right? Something that makes Maul do splash damage or something like that, right? Various other Maul amps are significantly more interesting, in my opinion, than just flat crit. It's It's not fun. It's not interesting. I'm not the biggest fan of it, and I think any of those three things would be more interesting. I think also you could have baked one of those things into Tooth and Claw as well. Like if Tooth and Claw procs now make Maul apply to your next auto, or maybe Tooth and Claw procs just cost no rage. And then the other thing that you didn't bake into Tooth and Claw could be the trait above Tooth and Claw, or whichever order you put this in, and that way you're making Maul more interesting to press. All of a sudden, people want to press and don't feel bad for pressing, because that was a big thing in a lot of Shadowlands where like people are like, oh yeah, just take Maul off your bars. Now that's not the correct way to use Maul. Right? There were situations where you would use Maul throughout Shadowlands, and of course that's more in Dragonflight with the buffs to Maul. But people just felt bad pressing Maul, and so they just moved away from ever using Maul, which is never what you want to do, right? It doesn't, to have an ability that doesn't feel good to press, but cost a lot of resources to press in terms of using your global and using your rage. It's not a good combination. So they definitely need to make Maul feel better, and just having a passive crit node for Maul is not doing you any favors. Do something to Maul with that node. So that's all the changes to the nodes I've made. As you can see, though, I have adjusted the positioning of nodes as well. So I've added Rage Generation to the top here with Blood Frenzy moving towards and connecting to Thrash traits. Gosh, did I mention that? Why is Blood Frenzy down here? What is it doing? It's a Thrash Rage Gen trait. Thrash is over here. Why is this with the Moonfire stuff? Anyways, okay. So I've moved the Rage Gen trait for Thrash up here, for Mangle up here. Potentially, you could also nerf the damage increase, because this is also a damage increase to Mangle. So you could maybe nerf that slightly because it's a tier 1 talent. But I moved it up here for Rage Gen on Mangle, Rage Gen on Thrash. I've moved the Thrash traits towards the center of the tree, so they can now connect down towards Incarn easily. I moved the Moonfire traits back up out of the capstone level to the middle area here. And again, made in such a way that they can connect and you can grab all the Moonfire traits you'd want. And you also don't have 6 Moonfire traits in the capstone level. You now only have 2, really. I've moved the Maul traits over to the side, so they're not really blocking pathing, forcing you to take them. They're there to take them in situations where you would want them, but you're not kind of always forced into them. Similarly, the Layered Main and the Reworked Pulverize are on the right side here as well. Moving down the tree, I add my only connections to this tree that I'm adding in the capstone level to give you a little bit of lateral movement here. So with 1 point investment in either side of the middle, you can move to the left or right, at least some of the traits, and have access to those, which gives you a bit more flexibility. Otherwise, there's not too much movement here. So I moved Pulverize. I put Dream of Cenarius here on the right side. Survival of the Fittest is back down here. I've added in Natural Order's Will, as well as the choice node between into the Wildfire and Guardian of Elune. But again, could definitely be something where this is only into the Wildfire and Guardian of Elune ends up back up here instead of Ursox Endurance, that kind of thing. In general, I think this path thing is just way more cohesive. It makes way more sense. The synergies and then the traits that connect lead into each other, and you're able to actually get these synergies without having to have points on complete opposite sides of the tree for some reason. It just doesn't make sense. Your Rage Gen isn't locked at the bottom in your capstone level anymore, and I've added in a few more returning abilities that I think honestly just should have been included in the first place. So that's my thoughts. Guardian Druid not in a good spot right now. Really hoping this is only the first round of changes. Hopefully there's more to come. But these talent tree changes were not really what anyone in the community was asking for that I can recall. So I'm a bit concerned with the direction they're moving. But let me know what you guys think. How do you like my talent tree? What are your thoughts on what should be baseline, reworked, added? Let me know what you guys want down in the comments below. As always, if you enjoyed this video, make sure you guys do like and subscribe. I put out tank content all the time throughout Dragonflight. I'll be doing stuff in raids and Mythic Plus as well. I'll also be doing a tank comparison in the near future, kind of looking at how all the tanks are doing and stacking up against each other in Dragonflight. If that's interests you, make sure you guys do subscribe. Otherwise, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.